Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Martin Okpareke, and I work for JVS, Jewish Vocational Service, as the Outreach Manager and Refugee Family Strengthening Manager. This is indeed a very trying time for us Americans and for the nation. So with that in mind, I would like to maintain a minute silence for the repose of the soul of George Floyd and all those that were have been murdered by the police. Thank you. So with the topic of building a global community in Kansas City, when I was first approached to be part of this, I didn't really know how to present this, but I decided I was going to share with you about me, my work, and hopefully give some hint to those that want to be part of the global community here in Kansas City. But it is important to give you a brief introduction of me and my roots. I am originally from Nigeria, and I had fled a repressive, oppressive military regime. I was granted political asylum here in the United States at the Federal Courthouse in New York. In those early days, I struggled to understand what people are saying. Even though I came from Nigeria, colonized by Britain, spoke English, by the Queen's English, it was difficult for me to really comprehend what people were saying here in the US. People also struggled to understand my English, which was very strongly accentuated. In those early days, I also missed home and I missed my relatives. I struggled with navigating the social services system here and the health services system in the United States. I could not understand why I have to pay tax from my little earning. Everything was new and adapting was challenging. From New York, I moved to DC, Washington, DC, where I had relatives. I worked menial jobs in a factory before moving to Kansas City to attend Park University. My personal story here in the United States is replicated many times all over, though in different forms and experiences by most refugees and immigrants here in the US. It's a story about life. It's a story about living. It's a story about struggle, challenges, survival, resilience, and faith. In my current position at JVS, I go into the community to talk about JVS, who we are, what we do, and how folks can get involved in the work we do. I also coordinate events year-round for JVS, starting with the birthday party for refugees, Refugee Health Fair, World Refugee Day at the Zoo, and many other events and programs that uplift the refugee and immigrant communities. At the same time, this event provided opportunity for the Kansas City community to interact and engage with newcomers in our community. I also coordinate the Refugee Family Strengthening Program. Through this program, we're able to empower refugees and immigrants with skills that enhance their personal relationship. This is even more important as we see increase in domestic violence amongst the refugee and immigrant community here in the United States, mostly stemming from cultural influence, as most men feel like they are losing the power as the head of their house, as their family, the head of their family. The Refugee Family Strengthening Program also teaches financial literacy because most domestic disputes has a financial undertone. Now, regardless of the challenges most refugees and immigrants, have, they all dream of a better life here in the United States. We believe in education and making sure our children have the best opportunities. We believe in working hard. And as my grandfather used to say, hard work will not kill you. It will only make you better and stronger. I work with clients and colleagues from all over the world. And regardless of where you come from, everyone likes and wants to be respected. The key word is respect. Translate this in any language and it will mean the same thing. When you respect yourself, respect others, especially in these trying times, you are bound to succeed. Remember, what you read in school is foundational to your career. Hence, you may work in an industry different from what you read in school. I always try to tell people, especially those that are seeking for employment, if they are from different culture, different nationality, that if you come to America, you are like a chicken that went to a new land. There is a proverb in my place that says if a chicken or a fowl goes to a new place, it stands with one leg. And when it feels comfortable, it puts the other leg down. Because if you put both feet down, the wave or the wind might sweep you. So it is for us here in the United States. When we all arrive, we stand with one leg. We are watching, learning, seeing, observing what is going on, and hopefully adapting some of those to our personal lives so that we could not only be successful, but positively impact the communities we live in. So I tell everyone looking for a job, especially now that there's so much unemployment, you may want to start by volunteering because it's a key way to get your foot in the door and gain real life experience. In addition, you would also want to expand your network, your immediate sphere of influence, so that you could use that as an opportunity to get to know where the jobs are and how you can fit in. So building a global community here in Kansas City means that each and every one of us, immigrants, refugees, non-immigrants, Caucasians, Asians, for all of us to come together to work for this community. We may be from different places, but we all call this community, this place home. For me and for my kids, everything I do is to make sure they have a stable environment. And for that, I call on everyone here to do your part. Above all, respect everyone, including those that you may think are beneath you. Thank you so much, and I'm open to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Martin. I guess I'll start off with a question, and hopefully everyone else will come up with their questions in the meantime. How did you get involved with the work at JBS? What inspired you to work with JBS in particular?
As my bio had said, I started working first at Don Bosco. So when I came to the United States, I had applied for political asylum and was granted political asylum in New York. So when I came to Kansas City, I was connected to Don Bosco that used to support refugees and immigrants with employment. And they helped me get a job. Well, I went to Don Bosco as a client and for them to help me get a job. So I got my first job at a place called Goma's Chicken. Goma's Chicken is in South Kansas City by 90-something and Homes. Then from there, I went to St. Joseph Hospital. And then from St. Joseph Hospital, I got to Don Bosco to work, not as a client. Then while I was working, when they found me my first job, I became a soccer coach. And I was coaching refugee kids soccer. So from there, I got to talk to them. They could now understand my English better. And they hired me as a job placement specialist at Don Bosco. So I worked at Don Bosco for several years before I transitioned over to JVS. And honestly, I never knew I was going to be in this field for this long. And I never chose to work in this field. However, as fate would have it, when I was going through my political asylum process, it opened up my eyes to a lot of things. And then I decided that there are so many people like me that may need someone that have gone through the system to be able to help them. So that's why I am still at JVS and I've worked there all these years.
Jeanette has a question. She wants to know, what can we as native-born Americans do to support the refugees and immigrants in our communities?
Very good question. Most people from afar tend to see refugees and immigrants either from what they see on TV or from what people say or what people write. But when you get connected to a refugee or a refugee family, you would then begin to see them as fellow human beings. You then begin to see that they have struggles and challenges like everyone else does. You begin to understand that some of the myths about refugees or immigrants are just that, myths. So the best way to connect is through some of the activities and events that we provide, or you may seek out different other organizations that work with refugees to connect with them, maybe as a volunteer or even attending their events. We used to have a program at JVS where people could mentor new arriving refugees. We don't have that program anymore, but we have something similar that folks that are interested to help should connect with. And also, most importantly, to be politically aware, because the thing most of us love about America is its freedom and its political process. You are able to support refugees and immigrants through making sure that those that are compassionate, those that see every human being as human beings are elected into office.
So over your 19 years, obviously you've probably worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of different refugees and immigrants in our community. Could you, do you have any stories, I guess, of success or moments that particularly impacted you that you think we would like to hear?
How much time you got? I have several stories, but I'm just gonna take one that was most impactful to me. As the coordinator of the Refugee Family Strengthening Program, I teach refugees and immigrants skills, communication skills, problem-solving skills, financial literacy skills. Sorry. So during some of these programs, we have clients that have serious issues. So one story that comes to mind was a client from Liberia. He has so much challenge with his first daughter, so much so that she changed her name. And the dad was frustrated because he said, if it was in Africa, I know how to discipline my child. But here in America, I don't want to go to jail. So during the class I had for this family, the father, because during the class is communication skills training, we teach them, we ask them to talk about challenges they've had as a family and how they can use the skills we're teaching them to solve that family. So the father said his main problem is his daughter, that he doesn't know what to do, he's confused, he's frustrated, he is even sad that he is in America. And I asked him why. So he told me his story. So when it was the time for the daughter to talk, the daughter told the father that you don't understand me. So when the daughter told the father, you don't understand me, that you gave me a very horrible name and I have to change the name. And ever since then, he's mad. So I asked the father, tell her why you gave her that name. And he began the story. So in Liberia, during the crisis, the military came to their house to arrest the father. So his only younger brother came and accosted the military and allowed the brother the time and his pregnant wife to escape in the back door, and they slaughtered his brother. So when the wife gave birth in the refugee camp, she named the child after his brother. And because it was very traumatic for him, he had not been able to tell her why or how he gave her that name. So when they came to America after all these years, the girl hated the name. She changed the name in school, and it kind of pissed the father off, and they had serious issues. She moved out. Well, after going through the class and sharing why he gave her that name, they both began to cry, and the girl went back and changed back her name to the name her parents gave her. I was so powerfully impacted by that. And it's a story that touches me every time and that encourages me in the work I do because it impacts life positively.
It's a very powerful story. Wow. I guess another question that we might have is, you, part of your work, apologize for the phone, a part of your work is, you mentioned, is helping immigrants and refugees find employment. What misconceptions or things do you run into often when looking at employers here in the city, and how do you work to bridge that gap, helping refugees and immigrants find employment here?
The finding of employment is easy. The challenge is retention. When I used to do job placement, one of the things I used to tell my refugee client is, America is a capitalist society. I may be wrong, but I tell them America don't care about you. America cares for what you can do. America cares for what you can produce. So when you are looking for a job, initially most refugees used to say, oh, during the interview, please, I'm a refugee. I lost everything. I lost my family. I'm the only one here in America. I support all my relatives back home. I need a job. And I tell them, look, the employer don't care. The employer cares what you are bringing to the table. So most refugees and immigrants come with the mindset that if I tell a good enough story, I will get a job. But from American perspective or from the employer perspective, what have you to offer? How are we sure that you're not going to be a liability to us? So those are some of the things I tell young people looking for employment. When you go to look for a job, you have to sell yourself. You have to say what you are bringing to the table. You have to tell them how you can help improve either the bottom line or the work culture of the place you hope to work.
Jeanette has another question. She wants to know what your major was at Park University, and has that major and what you studied helped you in your career?
Yes, I studied public administration in Park University, but prior to that, I studied theater arts, drama in Nigeria. So that's why I'm very dramatic. um, yes, so I studied public administration at Park University.
I was going to ask you actually a bit more about your drama background. Do you think that, working with different people coming from different cultures, knowing how to tell a story when you're advocating for those, has that helped you, do you think?
In a way, yes. Yes, yeah.
So you're on a couple different advisory boards for fostering diversity and inclusion. What is, I guess, something that you think we could do as people who want to advocate for refugees or immigrants in our community in our own workplaces?
I really can't tell people what to do because every workplace is different. The dynamic of every workplace and composition of staff and what they do is different. So, but like I said in my opening piece, respect is very, very important in every workplace. If you work with, regardless of the makeup of people you work with, to respect them. Now, when I mean respect, because sometimes actions or inactions are interpreted within the prism of the culture it occurs, meaning that what I might think is respectful may not be respectful to another person based on, like for example, the Vietnamese community, they hardly look at you in the eye. To them, it is respectful to not look at you in the eye, right? But to some other culture, it's not like it's disrespectful, but they think you're hiding something if you don't look at them in the eye. So I really can't tell someone or an organization how to form their culture, but I want every organization or every individual listening here, first of all, foster respect. Second of all, be open-minded. Don't interpret action or inaction only within the prism of your culture, but also within the prism of the culture of whoever is communicating with you.
Sarah has a question. She would like to know, what has changed in your work with immigrants and refugees over the past 19 years, and what has remained the same?
What has changed is that most refugee and immigrant community now have their own local community organizations. Unlike in the past, when I just started, the refugees didn't have a community organization. They were all doing their own individual personal things. But now, even the newly arrived Congolese population have different Congolese community organizations. The Sudanese have different Sudanese community organizations, so on and so forth. All the different communities that are recently being resettled all have their own community organization. This is important because whether you like it or not, these are people that have been traumatized by established authorities in their home countries. So when they come here, even though we are assisting and supporting them with our work, they still see us as established authority and are reluctant to share some information with us and also respond to us in the way we would like to in terms of being compliant. But then when they have their own local community organizations, they are freer and they're able to interact amongst themselves. And then as an agency, we now reference those community organizations when we want to pass information to their communities, or when the communities have issues, we now go to the community organizations to know what issues ail them. And then we're able to look for resources within this community to support and assist them. That's what has changed.
Speaking with Kansas City specifically, what do you think Kansas City does well in supporting its immigrant and refugee community? And conversely, how do you think Kansas City needs to improve to do better?
Kansas City is actually a very, very welcoming place. As a matter of fact, I don't have a scientific research to this, but we have more secondary migrants here in Kansas City than original migrants, meaning those that were resettled in other cities, but when they talk to their friends, they eventually find home here in Kansas City. That is because this is a very friendly city, hospitable, the people are awesome. We have collaborated with the city for different events. So they are open to working with immigrants. And the former mayor designated Kansas City as a welcoming community for refugees and immigrants. He participated in several of the events we've done. The council, the city council, gave several proclamations identifying with and siding with refugees and immigrants. The business community are very, very welcoming to employing refugees and immigrants. More so, they are open to having JVS or different organizations come in to provide cultural competency training to frontline supervisors and managers where we send our refugees to work. So overall, Kansas City is a magnet for immigrants because it's a beautiful place, wonderful people, and of course, great food all over the time.
what organizations besides JBS exist now in Kansas City for people to learn more about our refugee and immigrant neighbors or get involved in those communities?
There are several organizations, but for the two main refugee resettlement organizations, JVS and Delalam, and then there are organizations like the Kansas City Public Library that has what they call RISE, Refugee Immigrant Services. They also provide services to refugees as regards immigration, and ESL, as regard ESL, sorry. And then there are organizations like I'm drawing blank here. I'm trying to think about our collaborators. Kansas City Public Library, Kansas City Public School System, Kansas City Public School System, Don Bosco. Don Bosco ESL, Don Bosco has been known to be the hub of ESL. So there are several organizations that work with refugees, but the two main refugee resettlement agencies are JVS, which is the largest, and then Delalam.
How has the pandemic influenced your work over the last 3 months?
Oh, it's still ongoing in the community. I was up and about in the community where our clients reside, and I was asking them what they think about this particular situation. And some of them laughed and said, Americans are seeing half, not even up to half of what they saw. And because of that, they are not as perturbed or worried, but they are practicing some social distancing and using of mask. But the most negative impact is for those that have lost their jobs. They are struggling to navigate the unemployment system. They are challenged with providing food for themselves and their family. If not for the intervention of JVS, Delalam, and several other organizations that provide packaged food to our folks, it would have been more difficult for them. But overall, this pandemic created opportunity for refugees to bond. Most of them, all they do is go to work, come back, sleep, come back, they don't have time to be part of their kids' activity or engage with their kids. But this time around, a lot of them are realizing things about their children that they never knew. So it's negative and somehow it's positive.
What advice would you give to people looking to enter the field of nonprofit work, community work, and working with immigrant services and refugees? Do you have any advice for people looking to switch into that field or young professionals?
The only advice I would tell them is to be open-minded. Don't judge a book by its color. Don't or be aware that there could be differences. Be aware that that your action, regardless of how sincere it is or how noble you think it is, may be interpreted differently.
You mentioned before that you never kind of like purposely put yourself into this field. You found yourself, doing the work every single day. Is that something that you think is common for your field and your coworkers and things like that? Is this something, that people just sort of fall into, or would you say that, it requires a lot of training and things like that?
Yeah, there are some trainings that are required, but most importantly, being compassionate and having a lot of empathy is the key.
So what does the regular day at JDS or working with immigrants look like for you in Kansas City?
There's no regular day. Every day is different. Some days may start with me taking a phone call early in the morning from clients because some of my colleagues don't give their cell phone to clients. Very understandable. But for me, because of my community outreach work with the community, most of my clients and members of the community have my phone. The reason being that I am like a conduit. A lot of our people have questions or have needs, either with our immigration department or with different other sources in the Kansas City area. So it is my job to point them to the right direction. And that is probably why I enjoy my work, because I tend to bring relief to a lot of people. And even though I may not be able to solve your problem for you, but I will listen and refer you to people that could solve the problem for you.
Jeanette wants to know whether or not you have advice for communicating with our immigrant neighbors. You just said that we can say and mean one thing, but our neighbors might hear something else. So do you have any advice for bridging that cultural divide?
It's always good to ask. It's always good to ask for understanding. Like if you do something or say something, ask them, because most time, most time people tend to assume, right? But when you ask direct questions, because most of us are direct, we don't, we ask direct questions, we respond directly, and sometimes we respond crudely. But being able to ask direct questions and not just assume that they know or that they understand, but ask.
So as the questions are winding down, I'll ask Martin if you have any final stories or things to say that you'd like to share, so that maybe we can get our final questions typed into the chat in the meantime.
One other story I would like to share is when I used to do the mentor program, I had a mentor to an Iraqi family. And the mentor so loved the family that every time they come to pick the family and take them to places of interest, take them to restaurants, so this is an Iraqi family. So after like 2-3 months, the Iraqi family called me and said, Martin, we don't want that guy to be our friend anymore. And I'm like, why? He does everything for you. He takes you out. He takes care of your kids. And he said, but Martin, we are not beggars. You say he's going to be our mentor and our friend. But every time he brings things to us, he takes us to restaurants, he takes us to other places, but he never taken us to his house, which means he's ashamed of us. And I had to make him understand that no, it's not that he's ashamed of you, but he does not understand that you would like to come to his house, or he may feel like, so why don't you ask him? You see what I mean? So sometimes people would keep this, instead of asking the question, they say, oh, then they don't want to be. Then when I told the American that this is what the refugee family said, the man was distraught. And that weekend, he went and picked the family and brought him to his house, and they had a very big party. So things like that are how your good intention may be interpreted differently.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I've been trying to think of the best way to frame this question, but when something horrific happens in the United States, such as the murder of George Floyd, how do you think someone who is a refugee or immigrant may look at an event and the response like that versus someone who is from the United States? I know I'm asking you to generalize with that question, but how do those perspectives differ?
I'm trying to be politically correct. With the incident that happened to George Floyd, not just George Floyd, but to Ahmaud Arbery and the ladies and several others. That was why I started my presentation with a minute of silence. As an African and as an American, I feel distraught that this beacon of hope that we all looked up to, this shining light that everybody from all over the world wants to be part of, has this negative underbelly that the whole world is seeing now. It's painful because as a father of 2 young boys, I can't imagine my boys growing up and seeing all that we're seeing now and knowing what they encounter is very traumatizing. I have discussion with my kids. I've had discussion with people in the community. And the only way we can understand this is by talking about it and not just keeping silent, is by participating in the protest peacefully, because we don't want anarchy, is by being with others and sharing with others, not because we want to see them or we want to make them feel bad, but because we want to be truthful, we want to be sincere about what we feel, what we think, and what we want to see. So this is a very challenging time, and it is still unfolding. So I told my kids, I don't hide anything from them. They are young teenagers. They see and watch the TV, the news, and I just try to engage them with what they are thinking and what kind of response they would have when school reopens. So I don't think I have the answer, or I don't think, I'm just sharing with you my thoughts and how I see all these things unfolding. But the good thing, just like I mentioned in another meeting, that George Floyd's daughter said it well. Her father have changed the world. Discussions is occurring in every organization about privilege and how people are treated. Now, most people may not know this, but when you work in an environment or when you are part of a group where before you can achieve or attain something, let me not phrase it that way. When you work in an organization or with a people or part of a group that does not share or care about how you feel, even when they know or see that things are not going right, this is a perfect opportunity for those issues to be addressed. And George Floyd, even though a tragedy, is eventually going to be one of those bookmarks in the history of America that led to better practices, hope, and progress for not just the colored, but for everyone.
Thank you so much, Martin. We really appreciate you joining us today to share about your career and your opinions and how our community is more and more global every single day. We want to thank you all for donating your time as well, and we'd like to thank you for your continued support of the IRC. So if you enjoyed today's event, we encourage you to consider joining us as a member, checking out our programming, and making a donation by texting IRC to the number in the chat box, which I will send below. Thank you all again for joining us. Thank you, Martin. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.